I don't think he did a good job of addressing the particulars on so many of the major issues facing the country. Obviously, I think the first year of his administration, the most significant thing is he's letting 90 to 100,000 people a month come across the border, as well as drastically reducing the amount of people with criminal records who are deported. He said we need immigration reform, but he didn't say anything like, I'm going to hire more Border Patrol agents, which the Border Patrol is screaming for. So I was disappointed that apparently he may spend the next year letting another 100,000 people a month come across the border. I was glad that he didn't follow down the path of his inaugural speech where he kept referring to racism and white supremacy. He left that on the table, which I was glad about. I wish he would have been more aggressive on the drug thing. I mean, obviously, the majority of the 100,000 people a year who die of drug overdoses in this country die from drugs coming across the southern border. And obviously, with so many people dying, twice as many people dying of illegal drugs every year as the number of people who died in Vietnam over 12 years, we're going to have to put some of these drug dealers in prison, but he didn't make a change there. With regard to the police, I think the big danger that President Biden has brought is that he wants to make it easier to sue police, and who wants to be sued? So he said, I'm not for cutting the police, but I think the reason we've had such big increases in murders in Milwaukee, among other cities, is because the police are more docile. They're afraid of lawsuits, and he didn't back away from that. So those are some of the issues that that I think are relevant and have to be touched on. With regard to inflation, he didn't acknowledge that it's caused by high spending. And I would have really appreciated if he would have at least said, say, the next budget or the next couple budgets, as long as he's president, we're going to keep even spending. But he instead talked about a lot of new spending initiatives, which is only going to fan the flames. I found over the weekend, one of the cities in my district, $1,500 for a one bedroom apartment. I mean, man, $1,500. How can a young person get out on their own with such inflation in the real estate market?
I want to ask about Russia and Ukraine. What do you think about the United States' response and the global response as well?
I think it's fine so far. I think it would be nice if he would cut off the oil, but I think it's also important to realize that we have to find a way to get an off-ramp because there are very many dangerous things that could happen. And ultimately, we're going to want Russia out of the Ukraine. They probably won't be removed by the Ukrainians. I think Ukraine has put up such a good fight. I don't think Russia wants to hang around there for 50 years. But I think we have to look ahead and make sure that we're planning for an agreement sometime in the next week and the next month. The longer we go without an agreement, the harder it is for both sides to give something. But I am worried about, a pulse attack, the electric grid. There are a lot of things that can be done. And well, it's good to stand with Ukraine. It strengthens their negotiating position the longer they hang out or if they push the Russians out. I think some of these people are just go, go, go all day long, and we have to remember Russia can do a lot of damage, maybe not with their conventional forces, but otherwise.
What do you think of the president's pick for the Supreme Court?
I don't think she comes from the legal area in which I don't think there's an appropriate amount of respect for the Constitution. He laid it out and said that he does not want a man and he does not want a judge who's not black, which means he was taking 97 to 98% of the lawyers off the table. And to me, when I'm picking somebody, being a new staffer, if I want to find a new dentist, whatever, I don't take 97 or 98% of the people off the table. I think that's a recipe for not getting the best person on the job, not to mention it's an insult to such a huge segment of the population. I would think everybody would want, particularly a pick that's going to be on the Supreme Court for maybe 40 years, would want to make sure we get the best possible and not say, I'm not going to consider 97 or 98% of the lawyers.
Last question for you. President Biden is in Wisconsin
Well, first of all, of course, a lot of that is something that is a state responsibility, but the overall infrastructure bill had a lot of spending in there for things other than infrastructure. We covered the huge increase in rental prices. There are also huge increases in food prices, automobile prices, and all of this comes down to passing bills without looking at the price tag. They could have got the same bang on that infrastructure bill for traditional infrastructure, even ports in addition to highways and bridges, at a fraction of the cost. And I think over years, the Federal Reserve will continue to print money to pay for that infrastructure bill, which will result in still higher prices, which of course hurts the average guy or even the person with low income the most, as they frequently do in Washington.
A Dane County judge put the ruling on hold pending a hearing on Tuesday. But Voss and Gableman were each issued a $1,000 fines. They were also ordered to pay the legal costs for the liberal group that filed the lawsuit. Those costs likely will fall on taxpayers if the ruling stands. That ruling came down just after Gableman sat down with Fox 11 to talk about the report he released yesterday. Gableman says his Republican-backed investigation won't be done until litigation is settled, with officials unwilling to privately speak with him. That includes Greenbay Mayor Eric Genrich, who had harsh words for Gableman today. Fox 11's Ben Krumholtz brings us balanced news coverage.
Michael Gableman says the biggest takeaway from his latest report should be elected officials acted illegally in carrying out the November 2020 election.
Eric Genrich and a few others on his staff rented out their authority, which wasn't theirs to rent out, and they sold it to CTCL and Mark Zuckerberg for the purpose of defeating Donald Trump.
That accusation isn't new. Greenbay accepted $1.6 million from the Center for Tech and Civic Life to help administer the election. In the past year, 3 courts have ruled the grants were legal.
How is it illegal if 3 courts already ruled that it was acceptable to accept those grants?
The illegality comes, that's an excellent question. The illegality comes because it is illegal for a public official to accept money in order to get certain people to vote at the exclusion of other people. That is called election bribery.
How do you get a court to rule that? Are you guys pursuing that? And how does that differ from the rulings that were already made?
You know what? We can talk about courts, and people have talked about courts an awful lot. We as American citizens cannot depend on the courts always to solve our political problems. And when I say political, I don't mean partisan.
The bribery angle is being tested with the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Green Bay residents and residents of the other major cities that accepted grants recently sent complaints to the WEC.
We have opposing viewpoints.
Meanwhile, Green Bay Mayor Eric Genrich is describing Gableman's latest report as baseless. In a statement, Genrich says we know today what we've known all along, which is that our election was conducted freely, fairly, and lawfully. He says the Gableman investigation continues to be an embarrassing waste of taxpayer dollars that should not have been initiated in the first place. The only aspect of it to welcome is its dissolution. In December, Gableman filed a petition to try to have Genrich comply with a subpoena for a private interview.
That litigation has to be seen through.
The next hearing in the case is scheduled for April 22nd. In Green Bay, Ben Krumholtz, Fox 11 News.
Democrats have offered heavy opposition to Gableman's review, calling it a waste of time and money. Republican lawmakers approved $676,000 for the investigation. Gableman says he's used $360,000. A new Marquette University law poll says 67% of registered voters are confident in the accuracy of the 2020 election. However, the data shows a deep partisan divide. 61% of Republicans said they were not confident in the accuracy of the election, a stark contrast to the 96% of Democrats who are confident. Independents were more split, with 55% being confident in the results.